church so much because this church is so different and it's definitely set apart. Esther was absolutely set apart. Esther is right after Nehemiah. And we're just kind of going to go through it. I found this. I just like this little, because you have been called. Everybody that is here has been called. And it doesn't matter if you are an intercessor. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher. It doesn't matter if you're a worshiper. It doesn't matter if you're a preacher. Everybody functions. We are the body. Everything functions together, right? So we use that a lot. Then the enemy kept saying, you can't. You don't need to do that. You're not Stan. You're not Steve. You're not Clarence. You're not Joshua. I've been calling him Joshua since Pastor Henry was here. But it doesn't matter. That was the enemy saying, you're not going to do it. And I told him he's a liar. And I'm done. I'm done with the enemy. I've had enough of this. Absolutely. We're going to stomp on him even more tonight. And we didn't come to this church to sit in a pew to mold. Right? So when we talked tonight earlier, it was already mentioned to be the hands and the feet and to get out. That is one thing that is so amazing about this church. It's not just what happens here, it's what happens outside the walls. We just filled up 2 trailers of stuff to take to the hurricane victims. That was not one person doing that. And guys, that was people outside of this church that did that. I mean, it's been amazing. My cousin's church in Hodgenville, they did a drive for just winter clothes, boots, socks, hats. It filled up the back of my Honda Pilot, and we had to put stuff in the trailer. When Scott started calling this morning to get confirmation of where to drop stuff off, everybody kept saying, we can't take no more clothes. We can't take no more. Scott got a hold of the right people and said, look, this is almost all brand new. It's all cleaned. It's sized. It's organized. It's packed by gender. And they're like, oh, we can take that. And they took it all. So tomorrow at 11 o'clock, they drop all that off. So it's pretty amazing. I know, it's so exciting. We use the scripture for such a time as this. It's in Esther 4:14 quite often, and for good reason. Because in this church, there's no sugarcoating the gospel. We don't water it down here. That's not allowed. Somebody will correct you in a kind way if you do. Not meant to be mean, right? But we do those because we use all of those things because we want everybody to know Jesus. God wants all of his children saved. It doesn't matter. Wherever they're at in their walk, they're called, right? It doesn't matter. The jail ministry that comes out of this church is amazing. What an outpouring of love, because you got people sitting there that have just made some mistakes. That's all. They're not broken. They're not to throw away. Exactly. They just got caught. I did a lot of stuff as a young person. I shouldn't even be standing here right now. I get excited to have a birthday. People hate their birthdays. I love it because God, I'm telling you, without God, I wouldn't be here. We were fortunate to grow up without social media, so a lot of people had no idea what we were doing. Yes. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have a job if we'd had Facebook back then, probably. Yeah, it was not good. So why Esther, and what makes Esther so special? Because all the things that makes a movie so successful in the world is in the book of Esther. It is all in there. You've got a young orphan girl who grows up to be a queen without the negative influence of Disney. You have a villain who has a plot to murder his enemy, and he goes way into a good plot to do that. He has a good plan, he thinks. He thinks he can outsmart all the good guys, but he gets his just reward in the end, like a good movie. Maybe it's just because it's a simple man who's living his very best life and is rewarded beyond his wild imagination. You have deception, you got lies, you got vengeance, you got hatred, you got bravery, you got victory, all in 10 short chapters. God's name does not appear one time, or is the mention of prayer in the book of Esther at all. It is the only book in the entire Bible that God's name is not mentioned. which makes it very unique in that sense. But it's also, there's only 2 books in the entire Bible that are named after women, Esther and Ruth. So you have a story of love, and you got a story of providence. Both very, very important in our lives. Very, very. I was blessed to have 2 grandmothers. Most people do. But I had an Esther and I had a Ruth. My Granny Ruth was very loving, very quiet, unless she got her feathers ruffled. But that was not very often. My Grandma Esther, she was bold. Bold in more of a worldly way. She could make a sailor blush with her mouth sometimes. But in the end, she knew the Lord. She was on her deathbed, and I had the opportunity to pray with her before she died. And the Lord sent me a dove the day of her funeral. And that was my confirmation. And ever since then, doves have been important, but that was the providence of God. And once you realize what providence is, it's God's hand on the situation. Even if you don't hear him, it's there. Always. So just don't think. Sometimes we get in those situations, but he's right there. Know that the providence of God is right there. Oh, I already got ahead of myself right there. So even though God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther, his hand is right there. He's orchestrating every move. The fact that Esther asked the Jews to fast shows that she's relying on God to resolve a desperate situation. She doesn't say, I'm going to ask them to fast and pray, although we know we need to do that. They go hand in hand, but she says, I'm going to ask them to fast. She knows God. She's aware of how special it is and what an important relationship it is. King Xerxes, on the other hand, that's his Greek name. I just like the name Xerxes better than Asherah. He is never beyond the control of God, even though sometimes you think that he might be. But God's hand is also there because he makes sure that Haman never, ever completes the plan that he has to take out Mordecai. We don't know 100% with certainty who wrote the book of Esther. Theologians have a lot of different opinions, but to me, because of the detail of it, I kind of think maybe Mordecai did it because it's so detailed. And he was there. He has the firsthand experience. That's my opinion, and there's no absolute certainty of who wrote it. The book of Esther was written while the Jews were in exile, and that's important. All the Jews did not come back. So you have a lot of Jews still there. In the providence of Persia, King Xerxes' area, you're talking 20 regions. So it's very, very big. Lots of different languages, lots of different nationalities, just a whole array of people, but a lot of Jews. And it's one of the few situations in the Bible where you have a lot of Jews living in a Gentile area. Usually it's the other way around. So it's unique. But the thing that you'll see is if Esther had not completed her assignment, the Jews would have been annihilated. Would we have gotten Jesus if she had not been so bold? So, if Esther was called for such an important assignment, you are called as well. You absolutely have a calling on your life. And this goes hand in hand. This is how the Lord has opened up doors because Pastor Steve knows he's getting ready to start talking about gifts and what your special callings are. The Lord's laid it on Scott's heart to talk about gifts soon. Because we're going to a new level. We're moving out of where you are. You can't stay in your comfort zone where it's nice and warm and fun. Nope. You're called for such a time as this. And as we get closer to these end days, the demonic gets busier because the end is coming. You back a wild animal in a corner, what's it do? It ain't happy. It's growling, it's hissing. And I'm a country girl now. If you ever come up on a possum or a raccoon, they'll hiss and they're nasty. A raccoon looks cute and fluffy and sweet. You get one cornered, it's a mean little sucker. I'm going to tell you what. It ain't nothing to mess. That's the devil. He makes things look nice and sweet, and Just come on, it's okay. Just do this one time. It'll be okay. And then it's over. You're sucked in. So don't be deceived. You need discernment. You need strength. You have to be in your word. You have to be praying because it's going to get worse, and we have to be ready for these things that are going to come. Interesting thing with Esther. It starts with a feast. So King Xerxes has called in these great leaders in his area. They have been having a party for 180 days. 180 days. Do you think you'd be tired? I go to a kid's birthday party. I come home, I need a nap. I ain't hanging 180 days. That ain't happening. So they're in the last part of this. They have this big feast. And King Xerxes wants to show off his beautiful, beautiful queen Vashti. He calls them in. He asks them to go get her. He wants to show her off. She said, I ain't coming. I'm not going out there. They're all drunk. I'm not going. It doesn't sit so well. That is not the plan the king has, right? He wants to show off every part. The palace was huge. The best of the best was rolled out. The food, the best drink, everything. And she said, nope, I'm not going. So he's very embarrassed. He doesn't know what to do. Most men are not used to their wives saying no, especially men. So he calls together his advisors, and they decide it's best to put her out, because if they do not separate her from the kingdom, what are the rest of the women in the provinces going to do? They're going to be standing up for themselves. And there is an order. Just like there's an order in our houses today. People get upset. Well, a husband shouldn't tell a woman what to do. There is an order in a home. A man should be the head of the home. The wife falls under that. But above him is God. He has to be led by God. If he's not led by God, things are out of order, and things need to be set in order. So that's biblical. There's no way around that. People need to understand that. You can look it up. But it's absolutely the way it has to be. That is it's in the first chapter. It's at the end of first chapter. In chapter 21. This advice pleased the king. He's found out now it's time to separate Queen Vashti. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, so that tells you that there were so many different languages. It had to go out in the right language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. So now he's without a queen. He needs a queen. So in chapter 2, Esther gets chosen as queen. So they make an edict to look for the young virgins. They bring them into the palace. Now this is not an easy process. So after all the beautiful young girls were brought into the palace, they went under a year's worth of beauty treatments and refinement. A year. It wasn't like I want a new queen and they bring all these girls in, they line them up and he picks one. It was not like that. It was a year-long process, which that's a long time. I don't have time to go get a haircut sometimes. I don't know how they do that, but they did. It was part of the process. It's part of the culture, and he wants the best of the best. Esther finds favor with one of the eunuchs, and she knew then. That was God leading her. She had to do what she was called to do. And she becomes friends with him. She takes every piece of advice that he gives her. Do you have somebody that you seek out that is a godly person that will give you godly advice besides praying? We need each other as the body of Christ to go to somebody when you need somebody to pray for. The men's text, I know you guys text each other. The women's group text, it's such a support, and it's so amazing to be able to say, hey, I need you to pray about this. And then they go, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. We need that support. We have to have it. Esther found that person to support her in her situation that she was in. she didn't have a lot of options. I don't know how those girls were then, but I'm just going to be honest with you. You put a bunch of young teenage girls in a room, and they're going to have to fight to be a queen. It's going to get ugly with the girls today. We got a lot of teachers in here. They can tell you, them girls are going to fight. It's not going to be pretty. Not at all. But Esther knew what she had to do, and she stayed focused. The providence of God, God's hand was guiding her the whole way. She listened to everything the eunuch told her, what to wear, how to walk, how to talk. Every proper thing to do. She was chosen. Do we do that? Do we do everything that God tells us to do? It's all right here, what we're called to do, what we're supposed to do. All of our answers are right here. But how many times do you think, what should I do? Hey, this is my problem. And we go to so-and-so and ask them instead of going to the Lord and say, this is where I'm at. This is what, I have to make a decision, Lord. Show me what to do. Then we're sidetracked. Now, sometimes our friends have good intentions, but sometimes I've given bad advice before. I've received bad advice before. So I try not to ask for too much advice. This is where our answers need to come from. It's going to get harder. So we need to know the answers because we got to be prepared. It goes back to our discernment. So Esther is chosen. Now here is this young, beautiful girl. She's been raised by her cousin Mordecai. It doesn't say what happened to her parents anywhere, but we know that she was an orphan and he raised her as his own. It never mentions if he had other children, if he had a wife. That's never mentioned, so it's not important. It was important to them then, but it was important for us to see the hand of God working in the lives. So Mordecai tells her, you can't tell anybody that you're a Jew. They are definitely the minority now. And it's not easy for them. I don't even know what time it is. We won't get through all of this tonight. I won't do that. We won't do that. So Mordecai is bold in his own self. I think that's where Esther got some of that. He's like, this is what I am. He was much like Daniel. He prayed in the open. He didn't bow to a god. He didn't bow to any people. You'll see as Haman comes into the picture. Their history goes back a long way, almost 1,000 years. When you see why they hate each other, you see why, but it doesn't. We're not supposed to hate people the way they do, but there is a reason why they hate each other. So in the history where you see it happens between Mordecai, he's a Benjamite, who is a descendant of Saul. Haman is an Agagite. So their hatred goes back 1,000 years from the time when Esther was written. The Jews were exiled from Egypt, and they were attacked by the Amalekites, whose lineage began with the grandson of Esau. God pronounced his curse on the Amalekites, which resulted in the total elimination of a people. Although Saul, he didn't listen, he missed that part. He received the order to kill all the Amalekites, including their king, but he disobeyed. He did not do what he was supposed to do. So God was not very happy in that situation. Samuel finally killed King Agag in a very brutal and people say the Bible is boring. No. There is some vicious murders, plots, and schemes that go on. So I'm telling you, King Agag, he was hacked to death. Like he wasn't he was hacked. Like that's pretty brutal. And it's specific. He was hacked into pieces. So because of the lineage from Agag, Haman carried a deep and he was very hostile towards the Jews. He was upset because they'd killed his people. So he was bitter. And when he found out Mordecai was a Jew, now he's got it out for Mordecai. Mordecai has a special place in the king's palace. He's not where he's going to get, but he's got a special place. You are not where you are going to end up in your walk. This is where you're at now. You may have started here. You're here. And there's multiple steps. You got to keep going up. You may stumble and trip, roll down a few steps, but you got to get back up. Keep going. Mordecai does that. He gets hurt, but he gets elevated. In verse 19, it tells us, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. So they were going through, some of the other virgins were still together. Esther had not known that of her people as Mordecai had not mentioned her people as Mordecai had commanded. Mordecai, I got lost. Mordecai, just as she was brought up by him. In verse 21, in those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, he was in his position in the palace, Bigthan and Tristan, I think is how you pronounce that, are two of the king's eunuchs who were guarding the threshold, became angry, and they sought to lay hands on King Xerxes. Mordecai overhears this, and he has that knowledge. He tells Queen Esther. Esther tells the king in the name of Mordecai. Then the affair is investigated. It's found out that the men were out to plot to kill the king. It's written down in the king's book. Those men were hanged in the gallows. So, Mordecai now has done his job. He's reported it. He's done what he's supposed to do. And then it just kind of lays low. But it's recorded. That's important. That comes to play here in just a little bit. In chapter 3, we find out that after these things, King Xerxes promoted Haman, the Agagite, and advanced him, and he sits on a throne above other officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, except Mordecai. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day, he would not listen to them. So they told Haman. And in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, or he told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. So he was really, really mad. This man's not going to bow down. So Haman thought he was above Mordecai. It goes back to generational issues. There's generational sins even then, right? It all comes in together, all comes together. So they had made him known the people of Mordecai. Haman sought to destroy all Jews and the people of Mordecai throughout the whole kingdom of King Xerxes. So now he's mad. He doesn't want to just eliminate Mordecai. He wants to eliminate all of the Jews. He doesn't want to fool with them. He goes back. He makes a plan. He decides in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, on the 12th year, King Xerxes, they cast lots, which is just like rolling the dice. And they cast lots. Remember when Jesus was on the cross, they cast lots for his clothes. So that was a way of making decisions quite often then. Before Haman, day after day, and they cast it month. So that's just how they decided what month they were going to make it, what day they were going to make it. They just rolled dice, which seems pretty odd, right? What happens is it comes out to be on the 13th day. This is how the 13th turns out to be such a bad number, the superstitious 13 part. Yeah, and I didn't catch that until just a couple of days ago, but that's where that comes from. And it was going to be a very bad day for the Jews if the plot had been fulfilled. If it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they put into the king's treasury. So the king took his signet ring from his hand, and he gave it to Haman the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money is given to you. The people also, do with them as you please." So a king's ring was a very, very important symbol. If you had the king's ring, you had all the authority. It was written and it was sealed. Piece of wax sealed with the ring. It was done. It was over. There was no changing it. The king had given his approval. You have the king's approval. The king. You have the king's authority. And we forget that, but we have that. You have the signet ring of God on you. It's yours. Now, what do you do with it? That's where it happens. What are you going to do with it? What Haman did with the power and authority he was given is not good, right? So you can take, same thing, you can use good, you can use evil, but what you have been given is the goodness of God. You have been given, you are the righteousness of God because of the blood of Jesus. You have that power and that authority, now you have to use it. All right? We're going to end right there. We're going to come back next Wednesday and we'll finish up Esther and you'll see what authority can do. It's all you, Pastor Warren.